Hello and welcome to the lecture on listening, which is chapter 3. I happen to like this chapter. It's important. Listening is the form of communication that we use most often. More than speaking or writing, more than anything, we're usually listening and receiving, but it's also the thing we spend the least time reflecting on and studying and really trying to improve. So that's what we're going to do today, is talk about listening. And don't you love listening to me? Okay, enough of that. So I want to start with just some basics. There's a couple of slides I'm going to go over here about some basics of issues related to listening. Then we're going to get into some challenges of listening before we get into the ways that we listen. So first I want to address hearing versus listening. Hearing is a physical process. Do you hear it? Right. Listening, however, is a cognitive process. You've heard it. Now, what have you thought about it? How have you processed it? Right? That's listening. So there's hearing versus listening. If you're having a hard time remembering which one's which, just remember, if you're hearing impaired, as I am partially in my left ear, you have a hearing aid, right? That's what or you say, I can't hear you, right? Which is just about the physical process, as opposed to listening, which is when you're really trying to take something in and process it. Perhaps like listening to music. Not just that you're hearing music, you're listening to it, you're trying to sort of take it in and have that experience of the music. So hearing versus listening. I want to make sure that we're clear on what those two terms are and how they're different. Right. As we're talking about listening, I want to address types of non-listening. We're going to get into different ways that people do listen, but I want to first talk about some types of non-listening. And what I mean by non-listening is times when we don't really live up to the ideal of listening to and trying to understand the other person and what they have to share. The first type of non-listening is pseudo-listening. My mom, when I was a kid, was huge at doing it, or she did it all the time. Pseudo-listening is when you sort of nod and smile. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. And no, there's nothing wrong with those cues. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. Those aren't bad cues necessarily. But in pseudo-listening, you're not paying any attention to what they're saying. You're just nodding and smiling just to like placate them because maybe you're there on your phone. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. And you're just there on your phone or whatever. My mom, when I come home from school, she asked about my day, and I would just like full of 1,000 words, or 2,000, or a lot of words. She would do that. Uh-huh, yeah, okay. And if I thought she was doing it, when I got to be about junior high, I guess, I learned to say, really, I can? And she'd say, wait, what was that? Say it again. I'd say, I knew it. Right. So pseudo listening is we're not really listening. We just nod and smile. Right. Selective listening is when you're listening for certain information. Think about the chapter in perception we talked about selective exposure and so forth, right? It's a little different than that because what we're doing here, related but different, is we're just listening for certain information and we're ignoring the rest, just letting the rest of it go because I just want certain piece of information. My sister was here visiting one time, and she visits periodically, and she wanted to know about the name of a restaurant. What's the name of that restaurant we went to that one time? And I said, oh, I couldn't tell you what it was. It's whatever. And she said, oh, thanks. I said, I think they're closed on Sunday. Okay, well, thanks. I'll go and check it out. And like, as in she was going there to go there and pick up some lunch with her and her husband. And then said, they're closed. Yeah, I know, I told you, right? So you just heard the name of the place. Okay, thanks. It's the name of the place. Put it in my Google thing, or Waze. She uses Waze, right? And not listening for the rest of the information. So selective is we're just looking for one piece and we miss the rest. Right? That professor in class is going over information and you just want to know, so how long does this paper have to be? So what you're listening for maybe, and you miss the part about the use of sources, the due date, how it has to be turned in. You listen for one thing and you miss the other. Defensive listening is when we expect that we're going to be attacked. We think the other person is going to be critical of us or is going to attack us. And so when we listen, we are sort of looking for the ways that they're being critical of us. We're not being open to their message and really considering and thinking about it. We're just looking for the ways that they're trying to hurt us, right? What is it? What can we maybe find to prove how they're, anyways, we're just looking for problems, right? We're defensive listening. We're listening for problems, right? Related but different is ambushing. And ambushing is when, and what lawyers, like in cross-examination in a courtroom, excuse me, are usually very good at doing this. Ambushing is listening for information, not to understand it, but to use it against the person. Ambushing is just sitting there, taking the information and collecting it, not to understand your experience, to understand the viewpoint they want to share with you, but just because you want to find the things that you can use it and use against them, right? That's ambushing, right? So those are types of non-listening, because you're not listening to understand or appreciate their experience or their viewpoint or what it is they have to share. We move on now to, as I say, things get in the way. Different ways of thinking about why it is we don't always listen well. And I start with communication noise. This is from the first chapter, and these concepts I pulled right from the first chapter, but I want to take a few minutes to talk about them more clearly here. So communication noise, there's different types, and the first type, it can be physical. And physical noise has to do with things outside of your body, right? So it's difficult to listen because the television in the room is on. Somebody's trying to talk to you, and the television in the room is on too loud. A barking dog, a screaming child. All this, by the way, is known as 7 p.m. in my house, right? These are all physical noise. We'll call those physical noise. Different from physiological noise, which is not necessarily literal noise of your body, right? It's the way that the physiology of your body may distract you. By that, I mean, you have a headache, so it's hard for you to listen and concentrate. You're too hungry to pay attention. You just want them to stop talking so you can go to the bathroom, right? Those are physiological, right? So not physical, which physical is like the stuff outside your body, the noise. The physiological are distractions created by your body, right? Distractions created by your body. Psychological, those distractions from, right, your head, right? So I don't mean headaches, I'd call that physiological. But psychological are things like you just had a fight with somebody, you come into work, and so you have a hard time concentrating on what somebody at work is saying to you because you just had an argument with somebody. I mean, it could be good. I think about, like, right after finding out that I was going to be a dad. We're not having any more. We're good now, things. But finding that out, and then the next day going to work and someone tried to tell me something, and my mind's drifting off thinking about, oh, I'm going to be a dad. Or, that's where my mind is, right? That's where my mind is. So it can be good things, but psychological noise is that there's something else going on in your head, and that's keeping you from concentrating. Could be a good thing. Very often they're sad things. And then there is semantic noise. Semantic noise is a distraction that's created by a word that a person uses. That's why we say semantic. It could be that a person uses a word or words that don't make sense to you, and so you're distracted by it. When they say something, you're distracted by their words, and so you're not able to sort of get past it. You're sitting going, what do they mean by that? It may also be that they use a word that you find upsetting. They use a word casually that to you it triggers in some way. The word could be somehow discriminatory. It could just be coarse language, but because of it, you end up being distracted, and so that would be semantic noise. The book also discusses listening barriers. And listening barriers, it says, are distractions, and it's referring back really to some of that communication noise. So when it says physical and mental, think about communication noise when we're talking about physical as well as psychological, right? So that's what when the book talks about distractions, it's really going back to that discussion about communication noise. So that's what that is. I just want to let you know about that. The book also discusses, rightly so, another barrier to listening, right? If listening is really trying to understand and process and sort of get what somebody's trying to share with us, when we have biases and prejudices, it could be biases and prejudices that have to do with maybe race or sex. What does a woman, what does a man know about this subject? That could be a certain bias or prejudice. It could be that when somebody addresses an issue, so if I am a father addressing issues about the safety of children, you go, yeah, whatever you say, like you're dismissing it. You're like, of course you'd say that, you're a dad, right? So it's a bias you have. A bias or prejudice you might have also just against a person that you think they never have good ideas, so when they go to speak, you automatically dismiss it, which by the way means you might miss something, right? So those are biases and prejudices. Also, we can have a lack of appropriate focus. As the book talks about that appropriate focus, it means not so much to the external world. It's not how the book talks about or you were distracted by the external world. The book says we end up focusing more on details than on main ideas. That's why I say lack of appropriate focus, and I add on there on ideas. As the book says, when we're listening, we want to try to focus on the main idea, but sometimes we can get caught up in the details of something, right? We can get caught up in the details. It's always really frustrating for me, given just sort of how I do approach listening, when I'm in with a group of people and we're being briefed on something that it is that we're going to have to do. Here's the first stage of what we're going to be doing, here's the second stage and the third stage. And a person's asking about, what's the date for the second stage? Yeah, I don't know. That might conflict with another thing. It's like, okay, that's a detail we'll get to later. Let's focus on these other stages, right? But because they're focusing on the little minutia of it, not the bigger picture. So sometimes lack of appropriate focus is we can get caught up in little details and not the main ideas so much. And then there's premature judgment. Sometimes when a person starts speaking about something, you say, yeah, heard it all before. You just assume that this is an argument, the same old tired argument you've heard before, and so you are very quick to just dismiss it because you think you already know it. It's that premature judgment. You're dismissing it, discounting it before you've really given it a chance. So it would be a premature judgment. There are other reasons that we don't listen, right? Other reasons we don't listen well, as I say here, and these go beyond what the book has discussed. One of those is an entertainment factor. We have a tendency to not listen as well to those things that aren't as entertaining. I mean, I do my best with my lectures, but even somebody really good can only make this stuff belly laugh good. Also, by the way, I mean, I'm not a terribly funny guy, maybe, right? So there is an entertainment factor. Sometimes we don't listen well because the communicator just isn't very entertaining. It doesn't mean there's not good information, but they're not very entertaining, or maybe their voice is dull and monotone. Something about them seems not animated, right? And so they're just not very engaging in that way, and that can be a reason we don't listen well. Sometimes we don't listen well because talking has more apparent advantages. When you talk, you get to let other people know exactly how you feel. You get to really achieve your goals. Your goals being people understanding your experience, your views, your beliefs, right? So that's what happens when you talk. And when we listen, we're not able to express that. So sometimes we don't listen well because to us, listening is a hindrance. Listening is the delay until I can get to the thing I really want, which is me talking to tell you what it is that I want. I want you to know what I want to have, what I want to get done, right? So talking can have more apparent advantages. Of course, we listen, we may find out the other person is very much on our wavelength, if you will. They're sort of with us. They get us. They know what we're talking about. They're in support of what we're saying. But sometimes, and also, by the way, there's so much more we can learn from other people when we let them talk and we don't talk. We learn so much more that can inform our decisions and our worldviews and our values so much better. But again, talking has more apparent advantages, so sometimes we don't listen well because it doesn't seem like it's as important as talking. Sometimes we let our emotions take over. The issue itself can be very emotional, right? It can trigger or bring up an experience for us, and so then we can't hear well. We don't listen well because we're caught up with an emotion. On occasion, somebody will be talking about challenges they have had in the past in their family, and I just start thinking about this person, what they've gone through, and I get sort of upset and emotional, and I get stuck in that. I shouldn't say stuck, but I become distracted by it. Not stuck, really, but I'm distracted by it, and so then I don't listen to them as well. So sometimes what happens is, yeah, we let our emotions take over. Emotions aren't bad things, but it can be something that if we get really emotional about something, it might distract us from hearing or to listening to somebody very well. By the way, if you find yourself getting really emotional and you're not listening well, you might say to somebody, I'm sorry, I want to hear this. Can you give me a minute? Because you're talking about that. It just got me to a bad place. I just need a minute. right? That may happen, right? So sometimes we do let our emotions take over and then we don't listen as well, right? Sometimes we criticize the superficial. It may be hard to listen to my lecture because uh, I know there is a little bit of nervous tick. I won't point to it, but nervous tick I have that you will hear sometimes. Maybe you're noticing if you're watching it all, the weird stuff behind me, the treadmill that seems to be collecting a lot of dust. It's not mine. Seems to be collecting. Why did I say that? I'm such a terrible husband. But you're collecting a lot of dust behind us or behind me. Yeah, we might get caught up in criticizing superficial. Criticizing superficial can really also veer into we get so enamored with a person's attractiveness, we're just staring at them. You're so beautiful, that we don't pay attention to what they're saying. So we can get caught up in those things that are superficial. Other reasons we don't listen well, we can get message overload. Just too much information. I know my lectures get long, but here's the thing, you got a pause button, right? So it may be that there's just too much to the message. It's more than we can handle. We're overloaded. And so it's just message overload, and then we have a hard time listening. That's why in in-class lectures, it's not good when I or other faculty want to lecture for 80 minutes straight. That's really rough, even if it's broken up with a video clip, stopping asking questions, a brief activity, anything to break it up, because otherwise it's just so much information. It's a message overload. And sometimes we don't listen well because we get, or because of message complexity. We're trying to follow along, but there are so many details we get lost. The other day, can I bring my sister up in her visits a lot? She doesn't visit all the time, but anyway, she was just here, and and she was going to take my mom to a dentist appointment for me. And I was like, oh, good, thanks. And I said, so do you know how to get there? And she said, well, I have the address. Why? And I said, well, it's really easy. So you just go down here and you make a left. And then when you go there, you make a right. You're looking for the next. And she said, okay, hold on. I don't, after the first left, I'm already, right? It's like, she said, that's just not how I think. Which I appreciate her going, okay, I can't even follow this anymore, right? So sometimes we don't listen well. We don't really take in a person's message. It's just too complex. It may be too technical, right? Sometimes medical professionals can give you great information, but sometimes it gets really thick, and it's hard to really follow what they're saying because it's too complex. Professors can do the same thing, right? It's just too complex, you can't follow it. We can become preoccupied, right? Preoccupied in the conversation, just with the things that we really care about, preoccupied with our own goals here. And that leads to the subpoint I have there, which is conversational narcissism. That when we're preoccupied, we're not listening to the other person, we're thinking about ourselves. And so as they're talking, when they say something, all we think about is how that thing is now something that I want to talk about, right? So they're talking, they're saying, oh, it reminds me when I was a kid, and we used to go, the ice cream truck would come by, and yada, 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 and you heard ice cream truck. I have a story I want to tell them now. When are they going to stop talking? I have a story I want to tell about an ice cream truck. Funny story, they're going to love it. And you're just stuck in that, you're preoccupied with it. So you're not thinking about them, you're preoccupied with your own goals and interests, yourself, right? And that leads to this conversational narcissism in which the conversation always is about you and your experience and thoughts and not about an interesting and mutual and beneficial exchange. And then we have something called the listening gap. So our brains work much faster than our mouths, although boy, I try to talk fast to keep up. Kidding. I know I talk too fast. I'm working on it. I have been like forever. So our brains work faster than people can talk. So when a person is talking to you, you're taking their words in, you're thinking about, that their earlobes seem to have an odd shape. Then you're thinking about what you need to get at the grocery store when you leave here. Oh, I can't forget, I got to make sure I call whoever. And you're still listening to them. Although sometimes you get caught up in the other things. Again, there is a listening gap because our mind can move so fast and process so much that what our ears are taking in isn't enough to keep us fully concentrated. And so therefore, sometimes we don't listen very well. Right. Now we're going to move to listening styles. And for that, we're going to take a quick break.